With me on the program now, the Assistant Treasurer Josh Frydenberg and Parliamentary Secretary to the Shadow Treasurer Ed Husic. Gentlemen, good morning to you. Josh, first to you. The Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Julie Bishop clearly dismayed by these developments this morning, despite the representations, despite the calls over many years from governments. These executions look like they're inevitably going to go ahead.
Well, these are very distressing developments. These two men deserve clemency. They have been reformed. They've obviously apologised for their offences, and I know, millions of Australians want to see them saved from death row. And I just call upon the Indonesian government, as Tony Abbott and Julie Bishop have done so on so many occasions, to show clemency in this case. I mean, Kieran, it's been a full court press by the Australian government. It's been completely bipartisan. No better illustration of that than the 6 Australian Prime Ministers, current and former, who went out very publicly and called on our good friend Indonesia.
Indeed, and now we see these two armoured vehicles leaving Kerobokan. All of that has come to nothing. The two young men inside these armoured vehicles heading to their execution.
Well, the Indonesians have shown, despite international pressure, whether it was from Brazil or the Netherlands, that they were prepared to execute foreigners for these offences, and that is very distressing. But we still, up until the very last minute, will be doing everything we can to try to get clemency for these two young men.
Ed Husic, do you expect any ramifications from this in the longer term in the Australia-Indonesia relationship, or is it too early to be speculating on that, do you think?
Oh, I think it is a bit early to be speculating on it, and on the speculation itself, Kieran, we can't afford it with someone, with a neighbour as important as Indonesia. We value the relationship with them, and as much as we value it with them, we can have disagreements on issues between both nations, and certainly on this we've argued all along. And I'd take on board Josh's point. I think one of the highlights, I think, of this term of Parliament, if I can put it that way, or one of the strongest demonstrations of bipartisanship, I thought, was Foreign Minister Bishop and Shadow Foreign Minister Plibersek on the floor of Parliament. These were some of the finest speeches, but not just for the sake of the speeches, but what was conveyed in them. And the point is, we can still have justice, but we just don't think that it should be down this path.
We're seeing these pictures from Kerobokan prison, as you were talking there, of Andrew Chan's brother and family. It's impossible, let alone to be the individuals affected, but the families would be just
absolutely terrible for them, because they could see, obviously, and again Josh touched on this point, that both men have been rehabilitating themselves, reforming themselves, and we still think justice can be served. We just want lives spared. We're not asking for freedom. We're not asking them to be released. But we just think there's a better way that the point can be made without losing lives.
I guess there are a few related issues to this. One is the Indonesian president. He's new in the presidency. He's not got a lot of political capital right now. He's got copping criticism left, right and centre. He campaigned on the issue of being tough on drugs. And with SBY not having granted clemency prior to the election, it seems that these individuals have been caught up in what is largely a president who's trying to shore up his position as well.
Well, you're right. President Jokowi has made a big point of being tough on crime, and particularly drug offences. But he's also a good friend of Australia, and I know he would treat very seriously the requests and the pleas from Prime Minister Abbott, and so too from Foreign Minister Julie.
But apparently he's not. That's the thing. You talk to Indonesia analysts, the experts that I've spoken to say they treat it seriously all the way up to vice presidential level, and then you hit a roadblock, that he just doesn't want to hear about it. He's determined to push ahead with these executions, and he wasn't going to listen to anything.
Well, clearly that's what is happening here, but at the same time they know that Australia is pulling out all stops at all different levels, whether it was from our elected officials to former ambassadors, to people at the bureaucratic and business level. We are doing everything we can as a country to try to get these two men relieved from death row.
Are you worried now, though, I guess beyond the diplomatic reaction, the people-to-people links, they've not been that great over the years, except for tourism to Bali, that they're going to be set back even further with our important neighbour to the north?
Well, Kieran, actually, I think they have been a strong bilateral relationship, people-to-people links. I'm thinking of the thousands of Indonesian students who study in Australia. I'm thinking of the fact that Indonesia sent forensic experts to Victoria after our bushfires to help assist with the identification of the victims. I'm thinking of what we are doing every day through our federal police and our intelligence services to coordinate encountering the terrorist threat. There is a lot of interaction between our two countries beyond just the trade and the political ties. They are a key partner for us, a key country for us, and the relationship is very, very important.
Ed Husic, I'm sure you've received this sort of correspondence, but some of our viewers have emailed me saying these two young men deserve what they get, that they knew what they were doing and they knew the penalties, and this is just the sad reality that they've got to face execution, but a lot of Australians don't have much sympathy for them.
In my part of Western Sydney, drugs are a real scourge. Like, we've seen families ruined by them, people's lives shortened, or the opportunities that they could exercise within them just curtailed as a result of drugs totally messing them up. So there may be people that say, well, the Indonesians are very open about this. They warn against it. I think it's important to remember that warning. But again, we would make the point that why repeat the cycle? If drugs are affecting lives, why go through this as well in terms of exercising the death penalty in this way as well and see lives ended? We think that justice, as I said earlier, can be served without going down the path of the death penalty. Can I just quickly touch on Josh's point about people to people? I don't think this is I get absolutely the points you made, and there are examples of the strength in the bilateral relationship, but the people to people links, I think, do need to be strengthened. And it's not a criticism. I think it's something that we should always be working on. Sure. And as much as we might have the students here, we don't really have much, like on the ground. You'll have some business presence by Australian businesses, but we could probably do more.
And not many students going the other way.
Exactly.
This is the new Colombo plan, though.
We need to do, but also, in terms of people inflows, in terms of people coming here, Indonesians migrating here, for example, and vice versa. So I think it is something that we can work on. And again, I don't make that as any. I seriously don't make it as a political point. I just think as a nation, there are opportunities, there are pathways where we can really build the relationship further. Having said that, Kieran, I still think there's something that needs to happen on the Indonesian side about whether or not the death penalty is the effective deterrent. I don't think it is, and I don't think we should go down that path.
Yeah, well, you're not the only one, and certainly not the only one in Indonesia either, in terms of that view is pretty widespread in Indonesia. In fact, one of Jokowi's closest confidants, the current governor of Jakarta, last week said he opposed the death penalty.
Well, I think Indonesia, Kieran, will be very conscious of the international reaction to the execution of foreigners, as we've seen with Brazil and the Netherlands, and we've seen France be very strong about their citizens who are facing equivalent penalties, and I assume as a country they'd be weighing all that up and thinking about the ramifications for them internationally.
We're going to take a quick break on AM Agenda. Back in just a moment with Josh Frydenberg and Ed Husic. This is AM Agenda. With me this morning, Josh Frydenberg and Ed Husic. Gentlemen, the opposition leader has called for a crisis summit on the issue of domestic violence. And when you hear the numbers of women who are hurt and killed through domestic violence, it seems like this is a very worthy idea, Josh Frydenberg. Well, it is a crisis and it needs to be dealt with.
You're right, it is a crisis. It needs to be dealt with. More than one woman dies a week in Australia due to domestic violence. Children are often the victim, and we had this terrible situation in Victoria in 2009 where a father threw his 4-year-old daughter off the Westgate Bridge, and the judge said in that case it was all directed towards the mother of that child. We are, as a government, doing a number of things. We have our second action plan, which is spending $100 million to try to stem the tide of domestic violence. Rosie Batty has been made the Australian of the Year and is a great advocate for reform in this area. Ken Lay, the former Police Commissioner in Victoria, has been asked by the Prime Minister to be involved through the COAG process, where we're bringing state governments together with the federal government to really follow through on a number of changes in this area. So, you know, while we welcome the comments from Bill Shorten today, what the Prime Minister is saying is he is effectively doing all of that already with the efforts through the COAG process.
The Prime Minister is absolutely genuine on this matter.
Yeah, and so is Bill Shorten.
I know he is, and you know, the Prime Minister's done a lot already in this space.
Yes.
Why not do this as well?
Well, he's saying we're effectively doing it already through the COAG process because ultimately you need to engage the states as well as the federal government. You've got to involve the local police services and the other community services.
Wouldn't it be a show of leadership to have that, extend the hand of bipartisanship to Bill Shorten and say, look, let's do this. I'm with you on this one as well as everything else we're doing.
Kieran, it is extended, and absolutely, just like we were talking about before, what is happening in Indonesia on this issue of domestic violence, there's no room for politicking. This is absolutely an area where both sides want the same outcome. They want, you know, a better outcome for families and for mothers and for children. And domestic violence in Australia is endemic. I mean, according to the United Nations, we're a leader in this area in terms of doing things about it, but it's also endemic.
Ed Husic, your response?
I was involved last year, Kieran, in my part of Western Sydney in the launch of a group that was trying to target the issue of domestic violence within subcontinent communities. And often the people that are supporting women that have been affected by this, one of the things, well, the two things that they really can't stand seeing is the violence being perpetrated in the first place and silence. That is, they feel that the issue doesn't get enough prominence in public discussion to be able to drive action at all levels to deal with it. And it's not the case just that, and I don't think anyone's arguing this, that you just put together a program and things happen, because there's something has to change in psyche within people who want to commit this, that they feel that this is an exercise of power and that they feel it's a legitimate way to do it. That has to change. But it changes when we all start talking about it more, and I think it's important what Bill Shorten's doing today in terms of outlining a series of packages, but also saying this summit needs to occur, is to, you know, build from that, you know, the commitment across all groups, across society. We need to drive this out. This is unacceptable. And as Josh had indicated, the loss of lives, if it was any other stream, you imagine if we were losing a life in any other activity within society at the rate that was happening in domestic violence, we would not tolerate it. So I come back to the point I started with. The silence is intolerable because people are losing, their lives are being wrecked as a result. And I particularly feel for the children having to witness it, you know, because the studies show that then potentially there's a higher risk of this re-emerging down the track. We need to talk about it, but that talk will drive action. But if we don't, nothing occurs and people's lives are ruined as a result.
And I guess that's the point. If it was any other area, whether it be terrorism or road deaths, crisis talks seem very appropriate. And I know that the Prime Minister has said he's doing other things, but again, I say, if it was another area or some other cause of this violence, people would be, you know, there'd be greater action, surely, than what we've seen to this point, because the numbers that you have cited this morning and that we've heard with yesterday's UN Women's Day, it's just horrific.
It absolutely is. Well, we are trying to do everything we can, and all options are on the table. And so I know Michaelia Cash has been doing a lot of very good work in this area. You've heard the Prime Minister talk about it, putting his stamp of authority on this issue. He's galvanising the work of the states. He's pulling in the experts like the former Police Commissioner, Ken Lay. He's got a very very public spokesperson who's now the Australian of the Year, Rosie Batty. I think we've turned a corner as a country in this regard. We are now putting this issue front and centre of public debate to exactly what Ed said. We need to talk about it. We need to be open to all options, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot more about it on a bipartisan basis going forward.
I just think if we can work together on a bipartisan basis for national security, let's work together in domestic security. That is, that people feel safe within their homes, that they don't have to confront this scourge, and that we are all united in saying, and being able to reach out to all corners and make sure we're all as one on this. I just think there's an opportunity for us to work together, and I think we should take that.
Ed, I totally agree, and I think the other good thing about this debate is you're seeing men talk about this issue, because often the men are the perpetrators, right? And I know my colleague Darren Chester has done a lot of work in Victoria in this area. Men talking about violence by men on women is something that maybe hasn't happened in the past.
Tim Watts on
your side, there's
a phenomenal amount of work bringing people together, and I'm so proud to see. I think that's a real point, because our gender has a lot to answer for, frankly. Like we have men that think it's acceptable to do this. It's completely unacceptable.
They're cowards.
Women's lives and children's lives, and we should be, we're doing way more on it.
Yeah, and as a country, we're better than that in terms of the numbers that you're seeing. It's
let's expose these cowards.
Exactly. All right. Well, let's finish with look at an area where you both focus a lot, and that's the economy. The intergenerational report out tomorrow. It looks like a couple of things. Productivity is going to flatline unless something is done, and it looks like the budget, according to the numbers, has done a fair bit of the heavy lifting already. Even though there are tens of billions of dollars of measures still blocked in the Senate.
Well, what you'll see in this intergenerational report, which is a critical document, it's done every 5 years, it's got 40-year projections, and it puts the context for our economic narrative and our budget repair job. So it basically shows what we inherited and the trajectory that Australia was on, where we are now going as a result of the reforms we've put in place, and it deals with the three big Ps: participation and how we need to boost that, productivity and how we need to boost that, and population, how the increase in the population is playing out, and particularly also the ageing of the population. So those will be the focus for tomorrow, for Thursday's announcement by the Treasurer. But I think this is a very important document which will hopefully provide the Australian people with the context for a lot of the economic decisions we're taking.
Ed Husic, your response to this, I guess, in terms of the budget itself, it says that the government can be a bit more incremental in its focus from here, and no big cuts. That you'd welcome that? Well,
I think the RBA is also, in the testimony I've heard Glenn Stevens give before the Economics Committee, he's also indicated that you need to think longer term about what's going on, and we also need to be conscious as well that we need to support the economy locally and not cut too much. I think the big problem is people want politicians to think long term. The IGR is part of that process of thinking long term, but we've had such a delay in the release of this report. It should have been released in a 5-year time span. We were told it was going to be released last year. The 5-year time span ended in early Feb. We still didn't get the report. We hear consultants are being brought in to support the work of selling this. We've seen the government outsource its political thinking to consultants because it does such a bad job on the budget. And we've seen departments being leaned on. Immigration, Treasury, leaned on to give numbers that are worse than reality for the sake of extending a political
So you think argument. It's a dodgy document tomorrow?
Well, I think this is the problem, is that, you've had Treasury officials say, hey, this is the Treasurer's document, and we've been calling for, and rightly through, Chris Bowen's been calling for, this stuff should be handled by PBO longer term. You need to have trust in the forecasts.
All right. We're going to have to finish our conversation there. Thanks, gentlemen, for our lengthy, broad chat today.
You got Ed's spin on a document he's yet to see, so that's a great thing.
Yeah, good. Let me deliver it. I'll do the job for you. Wink.
Cream on, mate.
Thanks, gents. At least we got one laugh in. A quick break, back in just a moment.
Yeah, but it was at my expense.